JobKeeper, JobSeeker will remain as they are right up until September. Then there's going to be a 6-month extension at a slightly reduced rate. We don't know what that rate is yet. But what's your reaction to that so far?
Well, they had to do this. We've been calling on the government to do this, and there's a reason for that. The economy is in worse shape today than it was back in March when the government first announced JobKeeper. We're in recession now. Unemployment's going up, not down. And I think the government's finally realised that if they just pulled JobKeeper out at the end of September, it'd just make the economic crisis that we're in now even worse. So I'm glad they've done it, but frankly, they had no choice.
Is there anything about today's announcement, from what you can gather so far, that you take issue with?
Well, I'm glad the government's finally admitted that people have been paid more than they ordinarily would have under JobKeeper. I think it's almost 1 million people who were paid more than their normal salaries under JobKeeper. We've been saying for months now that you've got an unfair situation where you've got some people, I'll give you an example, a single mum with 3 kids working 3 or 4 shifts at a place where she's been a casual for 11 months and gets nothing because she hasn't been a casual for 12 months. And then you've got a kid at Hoyts who does 1 shift and gets paid 10 times their normal income. We find out today that you've got almost 1 million people who've been paid more than their normal salary, and that means that billions and billions of taxpayers' money has been wasted here, and it all means more debt, more deficit. Can you imagine, Pete, if this was a Labor government? There'd be people screaming from the rooftops saying that there'd been a massive waste of taxpayers' money. This should have been fixed back in March or April. It could have been fixed when Parliament was sitting a month ago, but now we still have to wait until at least the end of August and maybe October before this fix happens and all of this waste of taxpayers' money stops.
Doesn't the government deserve some credit, though, because they wanted to get money out the door quickly? Because, you know, back in March there were so many unknowns. So shouldn't it be given a little leeway when it comes to that?
Oh, but it could have been fixed a couple of months ago, Pete. Remember, the government saw those big queues out of Centrelink, realised that JobSeeker wasn't enough, so they brought Parliament back and put in JobKeeper after we called for a wage subsidy. But it was pretty obvious pretty quickly that this was a mistake, a flaw in the model. Parliament's sat a number of times since March, and at any time over the last few months they could have amended the JobKeeper program to stop this waste of billions of dollars of taxpayers' money. You know, we asked questions in Parliament about it. The government has refused point blank. So when information becomes available on days like today that shows that billions of dollars has been wasted, I think it's incumbent on the opposition to say, we told you so.
There's a couple of figures that have been reported this morning, and we'll find out in a few hours' time whether they're accurate or not, but I want to get your reaction to that. So JobKeeper, Simon Benson reporting that it'll be about $1,200 a fortnight, so it's come down from $1,500. David Crowe in the Sydney Morning Herald mentions that JobSeeker will be at least above $700 a fortnight. Now, if that turns out to be accurate, what are your thoughts on those figures? Is it enough?
Oh, look, Pete, we've got to wait and see what the details are. We've consistently argued that this has got to be phased out, not cut out, and that on JobSeeker, it's just impossible to return to $40 a day. You've got more than 2 million people, I think, that are relying on this payment. On any given day, you've got 13 Aussies that are applying, or you know, there's 13 Aussies for one job that's out there. I've got a couple of mates who've lost their job throughout the pandemic. One applied for a job the other day and there were more than 260 people applying for the job. You know, it's just not real to be saying that everyone out there is bludging and doesn't want to go back to work. There's no jobs out there. People want to go back to work. The people who need to go back to work are the politicians. We need to get back to Canberra, fix the mistakes in this scheme and make sure that we're supporting Aussies through the rest of this pandemic.
Is there a line, though, because the government is aware that it doesn't want to provide too much money when it comes to JobSeeker, because that in itself can be a disincentive to work. Do you agree that there is a line there?
Well, Pete, I invite you to have a look at the Treasury report on this. The government's been saying for the last few weeks that, you know, everyone's a dole bludger and they don't want to go back to work. The Treasury report, as it's quoted in the Australian today, says there's disincentives there for JobKeeper, for the sort of person I just described that's getting paid 10 times or 5 times their normal salary that doesn't want to go back to work. It's not JobSeeker. If you've got 13 people out there unemployed for every job advertised in the paper, it's not because people are bludgeoning, it's because there's no jobs. We're in a recession. You've got higher unemployment than any time in the last 20 years. We're likely now to have the biggest deficit since World War II, and we need a plan from this government to create more jobs and get us out of this economic mess.
And do you have concerns for regional areas? I mean, I put this to a few people actually this morning that, you know, regional areas, jobs are going to be tough in the new year.
Yeah.
What is... jobs are tough now, actually, by the way, too. But what is the figure that you think is a reasonable amount when it comes to JobSeeker? What is the minimum that you would have thought?
Oh, we haven't put a number on it. We've just said that it's got to be enough to keep people out of poverty. And your point on the regions is well made. I remember back during the GFC, and places like Cairns were the hardest hit in the country, and they're being smashed again because they rely on international tourism, and when there's no tourists, there's no jobs. Back then, Kevin Rudd asked me, working with Lindsay Fox and Bill Kelty, to go around the country to the 20 hardest hit parts of the country and come up with jobs plans to help get those economies back on their feet. A lot of them were in regional parts of Australia. We put in local employment coordinators to help to create more jobs in those local communities. That's the sort of thing the government should be doing here, helping local communities to get back on their feet and create more local jobs. Otherwise, unemployment is going to be higher for longer, and the recession is going to be deeper for longer.
Just finally, Jason, as a Sydney-sider, you must be alarmed at the level or the number of coronavirus cases that seems to be increasing. You know, is there a sense of foreboding in your community that, you know, localised shutdowns are an inevitability, or do you think, you know, New South Wales Health is kind of on top of things at the moment?
Oh, I think definitely people are a lot more scared this week than they were last week. A couple of weeks ago, coronavirus almost felt like a bad dream, like it was something that, you know, was of the past. It wasn't going to come back and cause us to change our lives or lock us down again. That's changed in my community over the last week or so. People are worried. You know, I know, just talking to my mum and dad, they've got the mask. They wear it whenever they've got to leave the house. And what's happened at the crossroads shows us that one sick person going to a hotel can cause 20, 40 people to get the virus very quickly. So we've got to be very careful. We've got to, you know, this ain't over yet. You've got to keep your distance. You've got to make sure that you wash your hands. Otherwise, what's happened in Melbourne can quite easily happen here in Sydney.
Yeah.